in the golden halls of Baldoria Palace, where ancient traditions clash with modern ambitions, a single moment of cruelty threatens to shatter the delicate balance of royal harmony. When 18-year-old Marcus Thornwell, stepson to Queen Isabella, pushes his torment of 9-year-old Prince Adrian beyond acceptable limits, Captain Elena Vasquez must choose between protocol and protection. What begins as a defender's instinct will unravel secrets that have festered in the royal household for years, forcing everyone to confront the truth about power, family, and the price of silence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of Baldoria Palace as Captain Elena Vasquez made her routine inspection of the royal grounds. At 28, she commanded the elite royal guard with a precision that had earned respect from even the most traditional courtiers. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her emerald uniform bore the golden phoenix insignia that marked her as the youngest captain in the kingdom's history. Elena had served the royal family of Baldoria for 6 years, working her way up from a simple guard to the captain of Prince Adrian's personal security detail. The 9-year-old prince was beloved throughout the kingdom for his gentle nature and quick wit, qualities that made him both endearing and, unfortunately, vulnerable within the complex dynamics of palace life. As she walked through the east wing, Elena's trained ear picked up the sound of raised voices coming from the prince's study room. She quickened her pace, her hand instinctively moving to the ceremonial sword at her side. The voices grew clearer as she approached, and her blood ran cold when she recognized the cruel laughter echoing from behind the ornate wooden doors. Marcus Thornwell's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Look at you, little prince. Can't even solve a simple mathematics problem without crying. How pathetic." Elena pressed herself against the wall beside the door, listening intently. Marcus was Queen Isabella's son from her previous marriage to Lord Thornwell, brought into the royal household when she married King Ferdinand 3 years ago. At 18, Marcus possessed his mother's sharp features and his late father's calculating mind, but none of the warmth that should have come with his elevated position. "I'm trying my best," came Prince Adrian's small voice, thick with unshed tears. "Please don't tell Mother I'm stupid." Elena's jaw clenched. The boy never called Queen Isabella mother in her presence, always maintaining the formal "Your Majesty" as protocol demanded. But in private moments like these, his longing for maternal acceptance shone through, making him even more vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation. "Oh, but you are stupid," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "And weak. Father was right about your bloodline. The kingdom deserves better than a sniveling child who can't even stand up for himself." Elena heard the scrape of a chair being pushed back violently, followed by a sharp intake of breath from the young prince. She had heard enough. Palace protocol demanded that she announce herself before entering any royal chamber, but something in Marcus's tone suggested that protocol might cost precious seconds that could make a difference. She pushed open the heavy doors without ceremony, stepping into the sunlit study with the authority that her position demanded. The scene before her confirmed her worst fears. Prince Adrian sat hunched over his desk, his small shoulders shaking as he tried to hide his tears. Mathematical equations were scattered across his slate, most of them correct despite Marcus's cruel assessment. Marcus loomed over him, one hand gripping the back of the prince's chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "Captain Vasquez," Marcus said, his voice shifting instantly to the smooth, charming tone he used in public. "How lovely to see you. I was just helping my dear stepbrother with his studies." Elena's eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. The prince's tear-stained face, the crumpled papers on the floor, the way Marcus's free hand was clenched into a fist. Her training had taught her to read situations quickly, and everything about this scene screamed danger. "Your Royal Highness," she said, addressing Adrian with a formal bow that was deeper than strictly necessary. "His Majesty the King has requested your presence in the throne room for your afternoon lessons with Master Guillaume." It was a lie, but a necessary one. Prince Adrian looked up at her with relief flooding his young features, and she could see the gratitude in his eyes even as he tried to compose himself according to royal expectations. "Thank you, Captain," the prince said, rising from his chair with as much dignity as a 9-year-old could muster. "I shall attend His Majesty immediately." Marcus's grip tightened on the chair, and Elena saw a flash of anger cross his face before he masked it with false concern. "But Adrian, we haven't finished your mathematics. You know how important it is that you excel in your studies." "The mathematics can wait," Elena said firmly, stepping closer to the prince. His Majesty's time is precious, and punctuality is a virtue befitting a future king. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus was not in line for the throne, a fact that clearly rankled him despite his public acceptance of his stepfather's rule. Elena watched as his composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the resentment that simmered beneath his polished exterior. "Of course," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Family obligations must always come first." Elena escorted Prince Adrian from the study, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder as they walked through the corridors toward the throne room. Once they were out of earshot, she knelt down to the boy's level, her stern expression softening with genuine concern. "Your Highness, are you injured?" she asked quietly. Adrian shook his head, but Elena noticed how he favored his left wrist, holding it carefully against his body. "But I'm fine, Captain. Marcus was only trying to help me with my studies." The lie came so easily that Elena's heart ached. How many times had this scene played out? How long had the young prince been protecting his tormentor out of misguided loyalty or simple fear? "Your Highness," Elena said carefully, "you know that you can speak freely with me about anything that troubles you." For a moment, she thought Adrian might open up to her. His eyes searched her face as if weighing his options. But then the royal training that had been drilled into him since birth reasserted itself. "There is nothing to discuss, Captain," he said with forced formality. "I am grateful for your escort to see His Majesty." Elena nodded, recognizing the walls that had been built around the child's heart. She rose and continued their journey, but her mind was already working through the implications of what she had witnessed. As captain of the prince's guard, her duty was clear: protect Prince Adrian from all threats, both foreign and domestic. But how did one protect a child from a threat that lived within his own family? The throne room was empty when they arrived, which Elena had expected since her summons had been fabricated. She quickly sent word to Master Guillaume, the prince's elderly tutor, asking him to attend to his student in the library instead. The old scholar arrived within minutes, his kind eyes immediately noting the boy's distressed state. "Your Highness," Master Guillaume said gently, "perhaps today we might focus on geography instead of mathematics. I have some fascinating maps of the ancient kingdoms that I think you would find most interesting." Elena watched as the prince's face brightened slightly at the prospect of learning about distant lands and forgotten empires. Master Guillaume had always possessed a gift for recognizing when a child needed gentle encouragement rather than rigid instruction. As the tutor led Prince Adrian away, Elena found herself alone with her thoughts in the vast throne room. The afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the polished floor. But the beauty of the scene did nothing to ease the growing concern in her chest. She had sworn an oath to protect Prince Adrian with her life, but today had shown her that the greatest threats to his well-being might not come from assassins or foreign enemies. They came from within his own home, from someone who shared his meals and lived under the same roof. Someone who had learned to weaponize the boy's desperate need for family acceptance. Elena's mind turned to Queen Isabella, trying to evaluate what the queen might know about her son's behavior. Isabella was a complicated woman, intelligent and politically astute, but often distant when it came to the emotional needs of others. She had married King Ferdinand for practical reasons, bringing with her valuable trade agreements and political alliances. Her affection for her new stepson seemed genuine but abstract. The fondness of someone who appreciated Prince Adrian's role in her political strategy more than his needs as a child. The sound of footsteps echoed through the throne room, interrupting Elena's thoughts. She turned to see Marcus approaching, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes blazing with barely contained fury. "Captain Vasquez," he said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "I wanted to thank you for helping Adrian with his schedule. Sometimes the poor boy gets so overwhelmed with his studies that he forgets his other obligations." Elena met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated by the implied threat in his words. His Royal Highness seemed quite capable of managing his schedule, Lord Thornwell. Perhaps the overwhelm comes from other sources. Marcus stepped closer and Elena could smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the scent of his anger. "You seem very protective of my stepbrother, Captain. I do hope that your dedication to his welfare doesn't cloud your judgment about what's best for him." "My judgment is clear," Elena replied coolly. "My duty is to ensure Prince Adrian's safety and well-being. That duty supersedes all other considerations." "How admirable," Marcus said, his smile sharp as a blade. "I'm sure my mother would be interested to hear about your unwavering dedication. She values loyalty so highly, especially when it's properly directed." The threat was unmistakable now. Marcus was reminding Elena that his mother was the queen, that her position in the palace hierarchy depended on royal favor, and that favor could be withdrawn at any time. It was a power play designed to make her back down, to remind her of her place in the complex web of palace politics. But Elena had not climbed to her current position by backing down from bullies, regardless of their titles or family connections. She had earned her rank through skill, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to her principles. If Marcus thought he could intimidate her with veiled threats and political maneuvering, he had seriously underestimated his opponent. "I serve the crown," Elena said firmly. "That service includes protecting all members of the royal family from harm, regardless of the source of that threat." Marcus's mask slipped completely then, revealing the cold calculation beneath his charming exterior. "Be very careful, Captain. Accidents happen in palaces. Guards can find themselves reassigned to remote outposts. Careers can end suddenly when trust is broken. I would hate to see such misfortunes befall someone who has served so faithfully." Elena's hand moved to her sword hilt, not in aggression but as a reminder of the authority she carried. "Are you threatening a member of the royal guard, Lord Thornwell?"
"Threatening?" Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the empty throne room.
"I'm simply sharing wisdom about palace life. Those who understand their place tend to thrive. Those who overreach their authority tend to find themselves forgotten." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps clicking against the marble with military precision. Elena watched him go, noting the way he carried himself like someone who expected the world to bend to his will. She had encountered men like Marcus before, individuals who believed that birth and connections granted them the right to cruel treatment of others. But she had also learned something crucial in their exchange. Marcus was worried. His threats had the desperate edge of someone who knew his behavior was crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. He was testing her, trying to determine whether she would be an obstacle to his future plans or a tool that could be manipulated. Elena's reflection was interrupted by the return of Master Guillaume, who approached with the measured steps of someone bearing concerning news. "Captain," the elderly tutor said quietly, "I thought you should know. Prince Adrian's wrist appears to be injured. When I asked him about it, he claimed he had fallen during his morning exercises, but the injury is inconsistent with that explanation." Elena's blood ran cold. "What type of injury, Master Guillaume?" "Bruising consistent with someone gripping his wrist very tightly," the tutor replied, his usually gentle voice hardening with suppressed anger. "The marks are fresh, likely inflicted within the last few hours." Elena closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment to process the implications. What she had interrupted in the study had been worse than she initially realized. Marcus hadn't just been psychologically tormenting Prince Adrian, he had been physically restraining him, possibly preparing to escalate to more serious violence. "Has the prince received medical attention for his injury?" Elena asked. "He refused it," Master Guillaume replied. "He seems quite determined that no one should make a fuss over what he continues to insist was a simple fall." Elena nodded grimly. The prince's reluctance to seek help or admit the truth about his injury suggested that this was not an isolated incident. Children who had been repeatedly victimized often learned to minimize their pain and protect their abusers, especially when those abusers were family members. "Master Guillaume," Elena said carefully, "in your professional opinion, is Prince Adrian receiving appropriate educational support?" The old tutor's eyes sharpened with understanding. Elena was asking him to evaluate whether Marcus's so-called help with mathematics was actually helping or hindering the prince's academic progress. "Prince Adrian is an exceptionally bright child," Master Guillaume replied thoughtfully. "His mathematical abilities are well above average for his age. Any suggestion that he struggles with basic concepts is unfounded and potentially harmful to his confidence." Elena felt a surge of anger on behalf of the young prince. Marcus hadn't been trying to help with studies, he had been systematically undermining Adrian's confidence and self-worth while disguising his cruelty as educational assistance. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Elena said. I believe increased security measures may be necessary to ensure Prince Adrian's continued safety and academic success. Master Guillaume nodded approvingly. The prince would benefit greatly from a more supportive learning environment. Perhaps his study sessions could be relocated to areas with better supervision. Elena understood the subtext. The elderly tutor was offering to help create situations where Marcus would have fewer opportunities to isolate and torment Prince Adrian. It was a delicate alliance, formed by two people who recognized a child in danger and were determined to protect him within the constraints of palace protocol. As Elena made her way back to her office to plan new security arrangements, she reflected on how quickly her day had changed course. This morning, her biggest concerns had been routine patrol schedules and equipment maintenance. Now she found herself at the center of a situation that could have far-reaching consequences for the entire royal family. She paused outside her office door, looking out through a tall window at the palace gardens, where she could see Prince Adrian walking with Master Guillaume among the rose bushes. The boy's posture was still tense, and he continued to favor his injured wrist, but there was something lighter about his demeanor in the tutor's presence. Master Guillaume had a gift for making children feel valued and heard, qualities that seemed to be in short supply in other areas of the palace. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from her lieutenant, requesting her presence at an evening briefing about potential security upgrades. As she read the message, a plan began to form in her mind. If Marcus wanted to play power games and issue threats, she would respond in kind. But her weapons would be professional competence, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to her duty. The game had begun, but Elena Vasquez had not risen to command the elite royal guard by losing battles. She would protect Prince Adrian, even if it meant challenging the delicate balance of palace politics. Some things were worth the risk, and a child's safety was definitely one of them. As she entered her office and began drafting new security protocols, Elena allowed herself a slight smile. Marcus might have royal connections and political influence, but she had something far more powerful: the absolute moral certainty that came from protecting the innocent. In the battles ahead, that certainty would be her greatest strength. The next morning brought an unusual chill to Valdoria Palace, as if the ancient stones themselves sensed the tension brewing within their walls. Captain Elena Vasquez arrived at her office before dawn, having spent a restless night planning new security measures that would protect Prince Adrian without appearing to single him out for special treatment. Palace politics required subtlety, but Elena's growing concern for the young prince's safety demanded action. She had barely settled at her desk when her secure phone rang, displaying the private number of Sir Reginald Ashworth, the palace's chief administrator and King Ferdinand's most trusted advisor. Elena answered immediately, knowing that early morning calls from Sir Reginald rarely brought good news. Captain Vasquez, Sir Reginald's crisp voice, carried the weight of decades spent navigating royal protocols. His Majesty requests your immediate presence in his private study. The matter is urgent and confidential. Elena's mind raced through possibilities as she made her way through the palace's private corridors. Had someone reported yesterday's incident with Marcus? Did the king suspect that something was amiss with his son's well-being? Or was this about something else entirely? King Ferdinand's private study was a sanctuary of dark wood paneling and leather-bound books, a place where the monarch could shed the formal requirements of his public role and address matters that required careful discretion. Elena found him standing behind his desk, still wearing his morning riding clothes, his usually composed expression troubled. At 45, King Ferdinand retained the athletic build and commanding presence that had made him a formidable military leader before ascending to the throne. His marriage to Queen Isabella had been politically advantageous, but Elena had always sensed that the king harbored private reservations about the arrangement, particularly when it came to his stepson's integration into the royal household. "Captain," the king said without preamble, "I need to discuss some concerns that have come to my attention regarding security protocols within the palace." Elena maintained her professional posture while her mind worked to decode the king's careful language. In palace speak, security protocols could mean anything from actual threats to internal family dynamics that required delicate handling. "I am at your Majesty's service," Elena replied formally. King Ferdinand moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens, his hands clasped behind his back, in a gesture Elena recognized as his way of working through complex problems. "Tell me, Captain, in your professional opinion, what constitutes a threat to a member of the royal family?" The question was more loaded than it appeared on the surface. Elena chose her words carefully, understanding that her answer might determine how much she could reveal about yesterday's incident. Your Majesty, threats to royal family members can be external or internal, physical or psychological. My training has taught me that the most dangerous threats are often those that appear benign on the surface, but cause cumulative harm over time. The king turned to face her, his dark eyes searching her expression. And when such threats originate from within the royal household itself? Elena's pulse quickened. The king was opening a door to a conversation that could have far-reaching consequences. Her response would signal whether she was prepared to cross the invisible lines that separated security concerns from family politics. Internal threats require especially careful handling, Your Majesty. They demand discretion, thorough documentation, and strategies that protect all parties involved while addressing the underlying issues. King Ferdinand nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with her diplomatic response. He moved to his desk and picked up a leather folder that Elena hadn't noticed before. I have received some unofficial reports about interactions between Prince Adrian and other family members, the king said carefully. Nothing actionable, you understand, but enough to raise questions about whether current supervision arrangements are adequate. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Someone had reported yesterday's incident, or perhaps there had been other incidents that she wasn't aware of. The king was giving her an opening to share her concerns without directly accusing his stepson of inappropriate behavior. Your Majesty, Elena said, choosing each word with precision. I have observed situations that suggest Prince Adrian might benefit from enhanced security protocols during his daily activities, particularly during educational sessions and family interactions. The king's expression darkened slightly. Enhanced protocols. I see. And what form might such enhancements take? Increased monitoring of study sessions, rotating guard assignments to ensure continuous professional oversight, and perhaps adjusting the physical locations where educational activities take place to provide better security coverage. Elena was essentially proposing to make it impossible for Marcus to isolate Prince Adrian without directly naming Marcus as a threat. The king would understand the implications of her suggestions without forcing either of them to make accusations that could destabilize the royal household. King Ferdinand was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the folder on his desk. When he looked up, Elena saw something she had rarely observed in the monarch's expression: uncertainty mixed with paternal concern. Captain, I must ask for your complete discretion regarding this conversation and any actions that result from it. The stability of this kingdom depends on maintaining unity within the royal family, even when that unity requires careful management. Elena understood the subtext. The king was aware that Marcus posed some kind of threat to Prince Adrian, but political considerations prevented him from taking direct action. Instead, he was authorizing Elena to implement security measures that would protect his son while maintaining the fiction that everything was harmonious within the royal household. You have my word, Your Majesty. All security enhancements will appear routine and will be implemented with appropriate discretion. Good, the king said, his relief evident. I am also authorizing you to expand your authority regarding Prince Adrian's daily schedule. Any changes you deem necessary for his security and well-being should be implemented immediately. Elena recognized this as an extraordinary grant of power. The king was essentially giving her the authority to override other family members' decisions regarding Prince Adrian's activities if she deemed them unsafe. It was a remarkable show of trust, but also a heavy burden. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not disappoint your confidence in my judgment. As Elena turned to leave, the king called her back one final time. Captain, I want you to know that Prince Adrian speaks of you with great respect and affection. He trusts you, which is not something he grants easily. That trust is precious, and I expect you to honor it. The words carried multiple layers of meaning. The king was acknowledging that his son had few people in his life who truly cared about his welfare, making Elena's role even more critical. It was also a reminder that Prince Adrian's trust was hard-won and easily shattered, requiring Elena to be especially thoughtful in how she handled the delicate situation. Elena left the king's study with her mind spinning through the implications of their conversation and the new authority she had been granted. Her first priority was implementing security changes that would protect Prince Adrian without triggering Marcus's suspicion or retaliation. She spent the next hour revising guard schedules and protocols. creating a system where Prince Adrian would always have professional supervision during educational activities and family interactions. The changes would appear routine to casual observers but would effectively eliminate Marcus's opportunities for private harassment. Her planning was interrupted by a soft knock on her office door. Elena looked up to see Master Guillaume entering with an expression of concern that had become all too familiar. "Captain," the elderly tutor said quietly, "I'm afraid we have a situation developing in the East Wing Library." Elena was on her feet immediately, her hand moving instinctively to her radio to summon backup. "What kind of situation?" "Prince Adrian is there with Lord Thornwell for what was described as a special history lesson. However, I passed by 20 minutes ago and heard raised voices. When I attempted to enter, I found the door locked from the inside." Elena's blood turned to ice. Marcus had managed to isolate Prince Adrian again, despite her increased vigilance. Worse, the locked door suggested premeditation, as if Marcus had planned this confrontation in advance. "How long have they been in there?" Elena asked, already moving toward the door. "Nearly an hour," Master Guillaume replied, falling into step behind her. "I came to you immediately when I discovered the locked door, but Captain, there's something else. I observed Lord Thornwell's demeanor when he collected Prince Adrian for the lesson. He seemed agitated, angry about something." Elena's mind raced through possibilities as they hurried through the corridors toward the East Wing. Had Marcus learned about her conversation with the king? Did he suspect that new security measures were being implemented? Or was this simply escalation of his existing pattern of abuse, driven by frustration at his diminishing opportunities to torment Prince Adrian? As they approached the library, Elena could hear muffled voices through the heavy wooden door. She pressed her ear against the wood, straining to make out the words being spoken inside. Marcus's voice was clearer, sharp with anger. "Do you think your father's little soldier can protect you from everything? There are consequences for running to adults when you should handle things yourself." Elena's hand moved to the door handle, but it was indeed locked. She pulled out her master key, grateful for the universal access that came with her security position, but hesitated. Bursting in without proper justification could be seen as overreach, potentially undermining her newly granted authority. "Someone's coming," she heard Prince Adrian whisper inside, his young voice tight with fear. "Stand up straight," Marcus commanded harshly, "and remember what we discussed about keeping family matters private." Elena made her decision. She unlocked the door and entered with the confidence of someone responding to a legitimate security concern. The scene that greeted her was carefully staged for innocence. Marcus standing beside a table covered with history books while Prince Adrian sat nearby, apparently studying. But Elena's trained eye caught the details that revealed the truth. Prince Adrian's face was pale and streaked with recently dried tears. His hands shook slightly as he turned pages in his textbook, and he couldn't meet Elena's gaze. Marcus stood too close to the boy, looming in a way that suggested intimidation rather than instruction. Most tellingly, several books lay scattered on the floor near Prince Adrian's chair, as if they had been swept off the table in anger or frustration. "Captain Vasquez," Marcus said smoothly, his public charm sliding back into place. "How unexpected to see you here." "Adrian and I were just having a wonderful discussion about military history, weren't we, Adrian?" Prince Adrian nodded mutely, still not looking up from his book. Elena's jaw clenched as she recognized the psychological manipulation at work. Marcus was forcing the boy to participate in his own deception, making him complicit in maintaining the fiction that everything was fine. "Your Royal Highness," Elena said, addressing Prince Adrian directly. "His Majesty has requested your presence for an updated security briefing. If you could come with me, please." It was another fabricated summons, but Elena was past caring about the ethics of small deceptions when they served to protect a vulnerable child. Prince Adrian looked up hopefully, but his eyes immediately moved to Marcus, as if seeking permission. The gesture broke Elena's heart and strengthened her resolve simultaneously. "Actually," Marcus interjected before the prince could respond, "we're at a crucial point in our lesson. Perhaps the security briefing could wait another hour." Elena stepped closer to Prince Adrian's chair, positioning herself between the boy and Marcus. "I'm afraid His Majesty's schedule is quite full today. The briefing needs to happen now." The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. Marcus's carefully controlled expression faltered for a moment. revealing the anger simmering beneath his polished surface. "Of course," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Family obligations must always take precedence." Elena helped Prince Adrian gather his books, noting how the boy winced when she accidentally brushed against his left arm. Another injury, she realized grimly. Marcus's escalation was continuing despite yesterday's warning. As they prepared to leave, Marcus moved to block their path, his movement casual but clearly intentional. "Captain," he said softly, "I do hope this security briefing isn't about anything concerning. Adrian can be quite imaginative, you know. Children sometimes create dramatic stories to explain ordinary mishaps." Elena met his gaze steadily, letting her silence speak for itself. She was not going to dignify his implied threats with a response. "Come, Your Royal Highness," she said to Prince Adrian. "We shouldn't keep His Majesty waiting." As they left the library, Elena could feel Marcus watching their retreat. She knew that this confrontation had pushed their conflict into new territory. Marcus now understood that Elena would not be intimidated or manipulated into backing down. The question was how he would respond to this challenge to his authority. Walking through the corridors with Prince Adrian beside her, Elena reflected on how much the situation had escalated in just 24 hours. What had started as her intervention in a single incident of bullying was rapidly becoming a broader battle for the prince's safety and well-being. But as she looked down at the brave young boy walking silently beside her, still trying to maintain royal dignity despite his obvious distress, Elena knew that she had made the right choice. Some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the personal cost. The war for Prince Adrian's safety had begun in earnest, and Captain Elena Vasquez intended to win. The emergency security briefing Elena had fabricated became a real necessity as the situation with Marcus Thornwell escalated beyond her ability to handle through routine interventions. 3 days after the library incident, Elena found herself in the unprecedented position of requesting a formal meeting with both King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella simultaneously, a breach of protocol that could have serious consequences for her career. The meeting was scheduled for late evening in the king's private conference room, a choice designed to minimize palace gossip while allowing for complete discretion. Elena arrived early, using the extra time to review her carefully prepared documentation of Marcus's behavior toward Prince Adrian. She had spent hours compiling incident reports, medical observations from the palace physician regarding suspicious injuries, and testimony from Master Guillaume and other staff members who had witnessed concerning interactions. The file painted a disturbing picture of systematic psychological and physical abuse disguised as family discipline and educational support. Queen Isabella arrived first, her elegant bearing and perfectly composed expression revealing nothing of her thoughts about this unusual summons. At 38, the Queen possessed the kind of calculated beauty that served political purposes while maintaining enough warmth to avoid appearing cold to her subjects. Elena had always found her difficult to read, a woman who seemed to view every interaction through the lens of political advantage. "Captain Vasquez?" the Queen said coolly, settling into her chair with practiced grace. "I confess myself curious about the urgency of this meeting. My private secretary indicated that you requested this conference as a matter of pressing security concern." Elena inclined her head respectfully. "Thank you for making time in your schedule, Your Majesty. The matter does indeed require immediate attention from both you and His Majesty." King Ferdinand entered moments later, his expression grim in a way that suggested he had some idea what this meeting would address. Elena suspected that he had been monitoring the situation more closely than his earlier conversation had indicated. "Your Majesties," Elena began once they were settled, "I have requested this meeting to address a serious security threat to Prince Adrian that requires your immediate attention and decision-making." Queen Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly. "A security threat? Captain, if there is danger to any member of our family, why wasn't I informed immediately?" Elena opened her file and placed the first document on the conference table. "The threat is internal, Your Majesty, which requires more delicate handling than external security concerns." She watched Queen Isabella's face carefully as the implication sank in. The Queen's composure never wavered, but Elena caught a slight tightening around her eyes that suggested understanding. "I see," the Queen said slowly. "And the nature of this internal threat?" Elena took a breath, knowing that her next words would irrevocably change the dynamics within the royal household. Prince Adrian is being systematically abused by Lord Marcus Thornwell. The abuse includes physical intimidation, psychological manipulation, and what appears to be deliberate attempts to undermine the prince's confidence and emotional well-being. The silence that followed was deafening. Queen Isabella sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable, while King Ferdinand's hands clenched into fists on the polished conference table. "That is a very serious accusation, Captain," the Queen said finally, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "I trust you have substantial evidence to support such claims about my son." Elena had expected this response. A mother's instinct to protect her child would naturally conflict with evidence of that child's harmful behavior, especially when the accusations could damage the family's political standing. "I do, Your Majesty," Elena replied calmly, distributing copies of her documentation. These reports detail specific incidents over the past several weeks, including witness statements, photographic evidence of injuries, and behavioral observations from multiple staff members. King Ferdinand was already reading through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Elena watched as he paused over the photographs, showing bruises on Prince Adrian's wrists and arms, injuries that the palace physician had determined were inconsistent with the falls and accidents the prince had claimed caused them. "My God!" the king whispered, his voice thick with suppressed rage. "How long has this been happening?" "Based on the behavioral patterns I've observed and testimony from staff members, I believe the abuse has been escalating for several months," Elena replied. "The incidents I've documented represent what I've been able to witness directly or verify through reliable sources." Queen Isabella was reading more slowly, her face a mask of controlled emotion that Elena couldn't penetrate. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady. "Marcus has been under considerable stress adjusting to palace life and his new role within our family," she said carefully. "Perhaps what you're interpreting as abuse is simply overzealous attempts at guidance." Elena had anticipated this defense as well. "Your Majesty, with respect, guidance does not typically result in physical injuries or psychological trauma. The behaviors documented in these reports go far beyond normal family dynamics or disciplinary measures." King Ferdinand slammed his hand down on the table, the sound echoing through the quiet room. "Isabella, look at these photographs. Look at the medical reports. Our son is being terrorized in his own home." The raw pain in the king's voice seemed to crack Queen Isabella's composed facade. Elena saw tears spill over before the queen quickly wiped them away, struggling to maintain her dignity while processing the evidence of her biological son's cruelty toward her stepchild. "What do you recommend, Captain?" the queen asked quietly, her political instincts taking over even in the midst of personal crisis. Elena had prepared for this question as well, knowing that her suggestions would need to balance Prince Adrian's safety with the complex political realities of royal family dynamics. "First, Lord Thornwell must be immediately prohibited from any unsupervised contact with Prince Adrian," Elena said. "Second, he requires professional intervention to address the behavioral issues that have led to this situation. Third, enhanced security protocols must be implemented to ensure Prince Adrian's safety while this matter is resolved." Queen Isabella was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the political implications of Elena's recommendations. Admitting that Marcus required professional help would acknowledge that there were serious problems within the royal household, potentially damaging public confidence in the monarchy's stability. "And if Marcus refuses these interventions?" the queen asked. Elena met her gaze directly. "Then he must be removed from the palace until he demonstrates that he can interact safely with Prince Adrian. The prince's welfare cannot be subordinated to other considerations." The bluntness of Elena's response seemed to surprise Queen Isabella, who was clearly unaccustomed to staff members speaking so directly about family matters. But Elena was past the point of diplomatic niceties when it came to protecting Prince Adrian. King Ferdinand leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of exhausted frustration. "How did we miss this? How did we allow our child to suffer while we were concerned with protocols and appearances?" Elena softened her voice slightly. "Your Majesty, abuse within families is often carefully hidden by perpetrators who understand how to manipulate situations to avoid detection. Marcus has been skilled at presenting his interactions with Prince Adrian as helpful guidance when observed by others, but you saw through it." Queen Isabella observed, studying Elena with new interest. What made you recognize what others missed? Elena considered her answer carefully. My training taught me to recognize patterns of manipulation and control. More importantly, Prince Adrian's behavior toward me suggested that he was desperate for someone he could trust. Children who are being victimized often seek out protective figures, even when they're too frightened or conditioned to ask for help directly. The truth was more complex than Elena could explain in this setting. Her own childhood experiences with family dysfunction had taught her to recognize the signs of abuse that others might dismiss or rationalize away. She understood the psychology of victimized children, because she had once been one herself. Queen Isabella was quiet for several minutes, apparently wrestling with the implications of Elena's revelations. When she spoke again, her voice carried a resignation that suggested acceptance of harsh realities. What professional help would you recommend for Marcus? Elena had researched this question extensively, consulting with experts in adolescent psychology and family therapy. He needs evaluation by specialists in family dynamics and aggressive behavior. There are excellent residential programs that could provide intensive intervention while maintaining discretion about his identity. Residential programs. The Queen repeated slowly. You're recommending that Marcus be sent away from the palace? Elena nodded. At least temporarily, until professionals can assess whether he can learn to interact safely with Prince Adrian. The prince's safety must be the priority while that assessment takes place. King Ferdinand spoke up for the first time in several minutes. And what about Adrian? What support does he need to recover from what he's endured? Elena's heart warmed at the king's focus on his son's healing rather than just stopping the abuse. Prince Adrian would benefit from counseling to help him process these experiences and rebuild his confidence. He also needs consistent, trustworthy adult relationships to help him understand that not all authority figures will hurt him. I'll ensure he gets the best therapeutic support available, the king said firmly. And I want increased security measures implemented immediately to guarantee his safety. Queen Isabella finally looked up from the documents she had been studying, her face pale but determined. I need to speak with Marcus before any decisions are finalized. He deserves the opportunity to explain his actions. Elena tensed, recognizing the potential danger in this suggestion. Your Majesty, with respect, confronting Marcus directly could result in retaliation against Prince Adrian. Abusers often escalate their behavior when they feel threatened with exposure. He is my son, Queen Isabella said sharply, her royal authority asserting itself. I will not make decisions about his future without giving him the chance to defend himself. Elena looked to King Ferdinand for support, but the king appeared torn between his wife's maternal instincts and his own son's safety. Elena realized that she would need to find a compromise that protected Prince Adrian while respecting Queen Isabella's need to confront her son. Your Majesty, if you insist on speaking with Lord Thornwell, I strongly recommend that Prince Adrian be removed from the palace temporarily for his own safety. The conversation could trigger unpredictable reactions that might put the prince at risk. Queen Isabella considered this suggestion, apparently recognizing its wisdom even as she struggled with the implications of sending either of her sons away from home. Where would Adrian go? She asked. His Majesty has expressed interest in Adrian spending time at the summer residence, Elena improvised, remembering the king's casual mentions of wanting to show his son the countryside estate where he had spent his own childhood. The change of environment might be beneficial for his recovery while providing complete security during this transition period. King Ferdinand seized on this suggestion immediately. Yes, that's perfect. Adrian loves horses, and the summer residence has excellent stables. Master Guillaume could continue his education there, and you could accompany him as head of security. Elena felt a surge of relief. Removing Prince Adrian from the palace would eliminate Marcus's access to him while giving the boy a chance to heal in a safer environment. It would also give Elena the opportunity to focus entirely on his protection without navigating the complex politics of palace life. Queen Isabella was nodding slowly, apparently seeing the wisdom in this arrangement. Very well. Adrian will go to the summer residence while I address this situation with Marcus. How long do you anticipate this separation lasting? Elena chose her words carefully. That would depend on Marcus's response to intervention and the professional assessment of whether he can change his behavior. The prince's return should be contingent on guarantees of his safety. The meeting continued for another hour as they worked out details of the temporary arrangements and established protocols for communication between the summer residents and the palace. Throughout the discussion, Elena was struck by the strange mixture of relief and sadness in the room. Relief that Prince Adrian's suffering would finally end, but sadness at the family fractures that had made such drastic measures necessary. As the meeting concluded, Queen Isabella approached Elena with an expression of gratitude mixed with pain. "Captain, I want to thank you for bringing this matter to our attention, despite the personal risk to your position. It couldn't have been easy to make these accusations against a member of the royal family." Elena inclined her head respectfully. "Prince Adrian's safety is worth any professional risk, Your Majesty. He is a remarkable young man who deserves to feel secure in his own home." "Yes, he does," the Queen agreed quietly. "I failed him by not seeing what was happening. I won't fail him again." As Elena left the conference room, she felt the weight of enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had succeeded in securing Prince Adrian's immediate safety, but the real work of helping him heal and ensuring his long-term protection was just beginning. The next phase of this battle would be fought not in the political arena of palace intrigue, but in the more complex territory of family relationships and psychological recovery. Tomorrow, she would take Prince Adrian to safety. Tonight, she would prepare for the challenges ahead. The journey to the summer residence took place under a veil of carefully orchestrated normalcy. Elena had coordinated with the palace communications team to present Prince Adrian's departure as a planned educational retreat, complete with advanced tutoring and outdoor activities appropriate for a young royal's development. The truth behind the move remained locked within the tight circle of Elena, the king and queen, and Master Guillaume. Elena rode in the lead security vehicle, her eyes constantly scanning the countryside for potential threats, though she knew the real danger they were fleeing remained behind them at the palace. In the royal car following her, Prince Adrian sat with Master Guillaume, apparently excited about the adventure ahead but still carrying the invisible wounds that would take time to heal. The summer residence of Thornfield Manor sat nestled in rolling hills 2 hours from the capital, surrounded by ancient oak trees and sprawling gardens that had been maintained by the royal family for 3 generations. Elena had visited the estate several times for security assessments, but had never appreciated its peaceful beauty until now, when she understood it as a sanctuary rather than just another location to be protected. Prince Adrian's face lit up with genuine joy when he saw the manor's stable complex, where a dozen magnificent horses grazed in paddocks dotted with wildflowers. For the first time in weeks, Elena saw the carefree child he should have been allowed to be all along, unburdened by the constant tension that had marked his life at the palace. "Captain Vasquez," Prince Adrian said as they approached the main house, "will I really be allowed to ride the horses?" Elena smiled at the hope in his voice. "Every day, Your Royal Highness, as long as you keep up with your studies with Master Guillaume. Exercise and fresh air are excellent for both physical health and academic focus." Master Guillaume, who had been quiet during most of the journey, patted the prince's shoulder gently. "I think we'll find that mathematics seems much more interesting when we can apply it to calculating distances across riding trails and measuring feed portions for the horses." Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward the elderly tutor, who had instinctively understood that Prince Adrian needed learning experiences that felt like freedom rather than confinement. After months of education sessions that had become associated with psychological torment, the boy needed to rediscover the joy of discovering new knowledge. The manor staff had been briefed to treat this as a normal royal visit, with no mention of the circumstances that had necessitated the move. Mrs. Catherine Mills, the estate manager, greeted them with professional warmth that suggested she understood the importance of making Prince Adrian feel welcome without making him feel like a burden. "Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Mills said with a curtsy, "we've prepared the blue suite for your stay, and Cook has made your favorite lemon cakes for afternoon tea. The stablemaster is eager to introduce you to Luna, the new mare that arrived last month." Elena watched Prince Adrian's face transform with excitement at the mention of a new horse, and she felt some of the tension she had been carrying begin to ease. This environment would give the boy space to heal, while providing her with a more manageable security situation. The Blue Suite was a collection of comfortable rooms on the manor's second floor, with tall windows overlooking the gardens and distant mountains. Elena had ensured that her own quarters were positioned to provide optimal security coverage while giving Prince Adrien appropriate privacy. Master Guillaume had been given the adjacent suite, allowing for easy coordination of educational activities. As they settled into their temporary home, Elena began implementing the enhanced security measures that would protect Prince Adrien while allowing him to experience the freedom that had been stolen from him at the palace. The estate's isolation provided natural security, but Elena established additional protocols that would ensure immediate response to any threats. Her secure phone rang while she was reviewing the perimeter security system with the estate's groundskeeper. The caller ID showed King Ferdinand's private number, and Elena answered immediately. "Captain!" The king's voice was heavy with exhaustion and barely controlled anger. "I wanted to update you on the situation here at the palace." Elena excused herself from the groundskeeper and moved to a private location where she could speak freely. "How did the conversation with Lord Thornwell proceed, Your Majesty?" "It was enlightening," the king replied grimly. Marcus initially denied all accusations, claiming that he was only trying to help Adrien become stronger and more disciplined. When confronted with the photographic evidence of injuries, he became defensive and accused Adrien of being manipulative and attention-seeking. Elena's jaw clenched. Even when presented with undeniable evidence, Marcus was continuing to blame his victim, a classic pattern of abusive behavior that suggested deep-rooted psychological issues. How did Queen Isabella respond to his denials? She was devastated, the king admitted. Watching her son lie to her face while trying to justify harming Adrien was perhaps the most painful thing she's ever experienced. But it also crystallized her understanding that professional intervention is absolutely necessary. Elena felt relief mixed with sympathy for the queen, who was facing the collapse of her hopes for family harmony, while simultaneously confronting the reality of her biological son's dangerous behavior. "What arrangements have been made for his treatment?" "Marcus will be leaving for a residential facility tomorrow morning," King Ferdinand replied. "Dr. Seri Comfes, Helena Marks, who specializes in adolescent behavioral disorders, has agreed to oversee his evaluation and treatment. The program is completely confidential and has experience working with high-profile families." Elena was familiar with Dr. Marks by reputation, knowing her to be one of the country's leading experts in treating young people with aggressive and manipulative behavioral patterns. If anyone could help Marcus develop healthier ways of relating to others, it would be her. "How long is the program expected to last?" "The initial evaluation phase is 6 months, the king explained. After that, Dr. Marks will determine whether Marcus can benefit from continued treatment or whether longer-term residential placement is necessary. His return to the palace will be contingent on professional certification that he poses no threat to Adrien. Elena nodded approvingly. The king and queen were taking the situation seriously and prioritizing Prince Adrien's safety over political considerations or family convenience. It was the right decision, even though it would undoubtedly be painful for everyone involved. "And how is Queen Isabella handling Marcus's departure?" "She's struggling, as you might imagine," the king replied quietly. "She feels guilty for not recognizing the problem sooner, and she's torn between her maternal instincts to protect Marcus and her responsibility to ensure Adrien's safety. She's asked me to convey her gratitude for your advocacy on Adrien's behalf." Elena felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. She respected Queen Isabella's difficult position and was grateful for her ultimate support of the necessary interventions, even though it meant sacrificing her vision of family unity. "Please assure Her Majesty that my primary concern is the well-being of both young men," Elena replied diplomatically. "I hope that Marcus receives the help he needs to develop healthier relationships in the future." "We all share that hope," the king agreed. "Now, tell me about Adrien. How is he adjusting to the change of environment?" Elena looked out the window toward the stables, where she could see Prince Adrien walking with the stablemaster, apparently receiving an introduction to the horses he would be riding during his stay. "He seems genuinely happy for the first time in months, Your Majesty. The freedom to move around without constantly looking over his shoulder is already making a visible difference in his demeanor." "Good," the king said with evident relief. "He deserves to feel safe and carefree." "Master Guillaume mentioned that you've developed some innovative approaches to his education during this transition." Elena smiled, thinking about the plans she and Master Guillaume had discussed for incorporating Adrien's interests and natural talents into his learning experiences. We're designing his curriculum around practical applications and outdoor activities that will help him rebuild his confidence while maintaining academic rigor. Excellent. And Elena? The king's voice carried a note of personal gratitude that went beyond his formal role. Thank you for protecting my son when I failed to see the danger he was facing. I will never forget what you've done for our family. The call ended with arrangements for regular security briefings and updates on Prince Adrian's progress. Elena pocketed her phone and headed toward the stables, where she found Prince Adrian in animated conversation with Thomas, the estate's weathered stablemaster. "Captain!" Prince Adrian called excitedly when he saw her approaching. "Thomas says Luna is gentle enough for me to ride tomorrow if Master Guillaume approves. She's beautiful." Elena examined the mare in question, a glossy chestnut with intelligent eyes and a calm temperament that suggested she would be perfect for rebuilding a young rider's confidence. "She looks like an excellent choice, Your Royal Highness. Perhaps we can incorporate riding lessons into your daily schedule." "Really?" Prince Adrian's face glowed with anticipation. "Every day?" "Every day that weather permits and your studies are completed satisfactorily," Elena confirmed, enjoying the simple pleasure of making a child happy without having to worry about hidden dangers or political complications. Master Guillaume approached from the direction of the manor house, carrying a leather satchel that Elena recognized as containing lesson materials. The elderly tutor had been observing Prince Adrian's interactions with the horses and stable staff with obvious approval. "Your Royal Highness," Master Guillaume said formally, "I believe we should begin our first lesson in what I'm calling practical mathematics for country living. Today's topic will be calculating feed portions and measuring distances across riding terrain." Prince Adrian practically bounced with enthusiasm at the prospect of education that connected to his interests, rather than serving as a source of stress and criticism. Elena watched as tutor and student walked back toward the manor house together, their conversation animated by shared excitement about learning opportunities that lay ahead. For the first time since this crisis began, Elena allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic about the future. Prince Adrian was beginning to heal in an environment where he could experience childhood joy without fear. Marcus was receiving professional help that might enable him to develop healthier ways of relating to others. The royal family was confronting difficult truths and making hard choices in service of doing what was right, rather than what was convenient. But Elena also knew that their current peace was temporary. Eventually, decisions would need to be made about Prince Adrian's return to palace life and his future relationship with Marcus. The therapeutic work ahead would be complex and challenging for everyone involved. As evening fell over Thornfield Manor, Elena completed her security rounds and settled into her own quarters with a sense of cautious satisfaction. Today had been a good day, the first of what she hoped would be many, as Prince Adrian began his journey toward healing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, a brave young prince was sleeping safely in a beautiful room, overlooking gardens where no one would hurt him. For Elena, that knowledge was enough. 6 months after Prince Adrian's arrival at Thornfield Manor, the transformation in the young royal was nothing short of remarkable. Elena stood at the edge of the riding paddock, watching as Adrian guided Luna through a series of complex maneuvers with the quiet confidence of a natural horseman. The frightened, withdrawn child who had arrived at the estate had evolved into a poised young man whose laughter rang out freely across the countryside. The healing process had not been linear or simple. There had been nights when nightmares about Marcus's psychological torment left Adrian shaking and tearful, requiring Elena's patient reassurance that he was truly safe. There had been moments when unexpected sounds or sudden movements triggered defensive reactions that reminded everyone how deeply the abuse had scarred him. But with each passing week, these episodes became less frequent as Adrian learned to trust in his security and rebuild his sense of self-worth. Master Guillaume had proven to be a genius at designing educational experiences that repaired Adrian's confidence while challenging his intellect. Mathematics became a tool for calculating jumping distances and feed ratios. History lessons took place in the estate's ancient library, while discussing the medieval origins of the manor house. Science experiments involved analyzing soil composition for the gardens and studying weather patterns for planning outdoor activities. Most importantly, Adrian was learning to see himself as capable and intelligent rather than weak and inadequate. Elena watched him solve complex problems with increasing independence, express his opinions without fear of cruel mockery, and engage with adults as partners in learning rather than potential sources of danger. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from King Ferdinand, interrupting her observations of Adrian's writing lesson. These weekly calls had become a cherished routine, allowing the king to stay connected with his son's progress while respecting the boundaries necessary for healing. "Good afternoon, Your Majesty," Elena answered, stepping away from the paddock to ensure privacy.
"Good afternoon, Captain. How are things progressing with our young equestrian?" Elena smiled at the affectionate nickname the king had developed for his son. "Adrian is thriving, Your Majesty.
Today, he successfully completed a jumping course that would challenge riders twice his age. His confidence and skill development have been extraordinary." "Wonderful news," the king replied, his voice warm with paternal pride. "And his academic progress?" "Master Guillaume reports that Adrian is performing at levels well above his age group in all subjects. More importantly, he's developed a genuine love of learning that I believe will serve him well throughout his life." Elena could hear the king's relief through the phone. One of his greatest fears had been that the trauma Adrian experienced would permanently damage his intellectual development or his ability to fulfill his future role as monarch. "That's exactly what I hope to hear," King Ferdinand said. "Now, I have some news that I need to discuss with you. Dr. Marks has completed her evaluation of Marcus, and she's ready to present her findings and recommendations." Elena's pulse quickened. This call would determine whether Marcus could ever safely return to the royal household and what conditions would govern any future contact with Prince Adrian. "What are her conclusions?" "Complex," the king replied carefully. "Marcus has made significant progress in understanding the impact of his behavior and developing healthier coping mechanisms. Dr. Marks believes he was acting out his own trauma from losing his father and struggling with his identity within our family structure." Elena listened carefully, recognizing that the king was choosing his words diplomatically to convey difficult information. "But," she prompted, "but she also believes that Marcus requires continued intensive therapy and cannot be trusted with unsupervised contact with Adrian for the foreseeable future. She's recommending a gradual reintegration process that could take years to complete safely." Elena felt both relief and sadness at this news. Relief that Prince Adrian's safety remained the priority, but sadness that the family remained fractured by circumstances that might have been prevented with earlier intervention. "What does this mean for Adrian's return to palace life?" "That's actually the other reason for my call," King Ferdinand replied. "Isabella and I have been discussing whether Adrian needs to return to the palace at all, at least not as his primary residence." Elena was surprised by this suggestion. "You're considering allowing him to remain at the estate permanently?" "We're considering what would be best for his continued development and happiness," the king clarified. "He's flourishing in the countryside environment. He has excellent educational support from Master Guillaume, and most importantly, he feels safe and secure. Why disrupt that progress by forcing him back into a situation that caused him trauma?" Elena found herself deeply moved by the king's willingness to prioritize his son's well-being over traditional expectations about royal family arrangements. What would such an arrangement look like practically? Adrian would continue his education at Thornfield Manor under Master Guillaume's guidance, with regular visits to the palace for official functions and family occasions. You would remain as head of his security detail, and we would expand the estate's staff to provide appropriate support for a royal residence. Elena considered the implications of this arrangement. It would mean that Prince Adrian could continue healing in the environment where he had found peace and confidence, while still maintaining his connection to royal duties and family relationships. It would also mean continued exile from Marcus, but that seemed like an acceptable cost for ensuring Adrian's continued safety. "How does Queen Isabella feel about this arrangement?" "She supports it completely," the king replied. "Watching Adrian transform over these past months has convinced her that his happiness and security matter more than conventional family arrangements. She's also come to understand that forcing him to live in proximity to Marcus, even with supervision, could jeopardize his continued healing." Elena felt a surge of respect for Queen Isabella, who had made the difficult journey from denial about her biological son's behavior to wholehearted support for her stepson's needs. "Has Adrian been consulted about these possibilities?" "That's actually why I'm calling," King Ferdinand admitted. "We'd like you to have an initial conversation with him about his preferences for the future." Nothing final, of course, but we want to understand his feelings about potentially making Thornfield Manor his permanent home. Elena agreed to broach the subject with Adrian, though she suspected she already knew what his response would be. The boy had mentioned several times how much he loved the freedom and peace of life at the estate, and how much he dreaded the possibility of returning to the tensions and protocols of palace life. After ending the call with the king, Elena found Adrian cooling down Luna after their successful jumping session. His face was flushed with exertion and excitement, and his eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that had been absent during his palace days. "Your Royal Highness," Elena said, "might we have a conversation about some matters your father asked me to discuss with you?" Adrian's expression became more serious, but Elena noted that he no longer showed the fear response that such requests had once triggered. His experiences at the estate had taught him that conversations with trusted adults were opportunities for support rather than sources of danger. "Of course, Captain. Should we talk in the library?" They settled into comfortable chairs beside the library's tall windows, with afternoon sunlight streaming across shelves of ancient books. Elena had spent many hours in this room with Adrian, helping him process his experiences and rebuild his trust in adult relationships. "Adrian," Elena began carefully, "your parents have been discussing your future living arrangements, and they want to know how you feel about the possibility of making Thornfield Manor your primary home, rather than returning to live at the palace." Adrian's face lit up with hope so intense that Elena's heart ached for all the months he had endured unhappiness while trying to meet expectations that were harmful to his well-being. "Really? I could stay here permanently?" "It's being considered," Elena replied cautiously. "You would still visit the palace regularly for official functions and family occasions, and you would continue preparing for your future role as king. But your daily life and education would be based here at the estate, with you and Master Guillaume?"
Yes, if that's what you would prefer.
Adrian was quiet for a moment, apparently processing the magnitude of this possibility. When he looked up at Elena, his young face showed a maturity that spoke to how much he had grown during their time at the estate. "Captain, may I ask you a question that might seem impolite?" Elena nodded encouragingly. "You may ask me anything, Your Royal Highness. Is Marcus the reason I might be allowed to stay here, because my parents are worried about him hurting me again?" Elena was struck by the boy's perceptive understanding of the situation. His time at the estate had not only healed his emotional wounds, but had also allowed him to develop the analytical thinking that would serve him well as a future monarch. "That's part of the consideration," Elena replied honestly. "Your parents want to ensure that you continue to feel safe and secure while you complete your education and preparation for adult responsibilities." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "I don't hate Marcus," he said quietly. "I understand that he was unhappy and took it out on me. But I also don't want to live in fear anymore. Here, I can focus on learning and growing without constantly worrying about someone hurting me." Elena was amazed by the wisdom and maturity in Adrian's response. Despite everything he had endured, he had developed empathy for his tormentor while also maintaining clear boundaries about his own needs and safety. "What would make you happiest, Adrian?" "Staying here," he replied without hesitation. "This feels like home in a way the palace never did. I love the horses, I love learning with Master Guillaume, and I love knowing that you're always nearby to keep me safe. I think I can become a better king by growing up in a place where I feel free to be myself." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the profound truth in Adrian's words. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, had become a prison for him, while this simple country estate had provided the freedom necessary for him to discover his true potential. "Then I will convey your feelings to your parents," Elena promised. "And, Adrian, I want you to know how proud I am of the young man you've become. Your strength and wisdom in dealing with difficult circumstances show the qualities of a true leader." Adrian's face glowed with pride at her words, and Elena was reminded of how starved he had been for genuine encouragement rather than the conditional approval he had received at the palace. That evening, Elena called King Ferdinand to report on her conversation with Adrian. The king's relief at learning of his son's preferences was evident, and he promised to begin making arrangements for Adrian's permanent residence at Thornfield Manor. As Elena completed her evening security rounds, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as her intervention in a single incident of bullying had evolved into a complete transformation of a young prince's life circumstances and future trajectory. Prince Adrian had not only survived his ordeal, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than he might have become if he had never faced such challenges. His experiences had taught him empathy for others who suffered, resilience in the face of adversity, and the importance of surrounding himself with people who genuinely cared about his well-being. Elena had also been transformed by their journey together. Her role had evolved from simple security provision to something more like guardianship, requiring her to navigate complex family dynamics while maintaining unwavering focus on protecting someone who had become far more than just another assignment. Looking toward the future, Elena knew that new challenges would arise as Adrian matured and prepared to assume his royal responsibilities. But she also knew that the foundation they had built at Thornfield Manor, based on trust, respect, and genuine care, would serve them well whatever obstacles they might face. The battle for Prince Adrian's safety had been won, but more importantly, the war for his ability to become the leader he was meant to be had been triumphant. In the peaceful rooms of Thornfield Manor, surrounded by rolling hills and ancient oaks, a future king was growing into his potential, protected by those who understood that true strength came not from enduring cruelty, but from having the courage to seek and accept genuine care. Elena smiled as she locked the manor's doors for the night, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of watching Prince Adrian continue his remarkable journey toward becoming not just a king, but a truly extraordinary man.